Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Wedding Photography with Taylor Jackson, the podcast that I've been doing for quite some time now. You can watch it on YouTube, you can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can probably go down to your local library and you can probably get it there. And today I'm going to answer a few questions from last week, as well as talk about a few new things that I have acquired that I will be eventually featuring on the YouTube channel. First up, if you have any questions at all that you'd like answered in this podcast, go on over to the YouTube video, or if you're watching the YouTube video right now, go into the comment section and drop any questions you have. I am happy to answer them on next week's episode. And on the 22nd, so a few days from now, I will actually be releasing my full flash course for wedding photographers, which means if you want to learn on-camera flash, direct flash, bounce flash, everything that I do on a wedding day, that course will be available if you are a member. And I've already activated the sale, so you can actually sign up for the $40 membership rate rather than $60, which it usually is. So you can get in on that and get access to every single thing that's on the members website. There's so much there, I'm not even going to begin to list it. It's my presets and courses, as well as book more weddings and all the bonuses that come with that as well. So $40 deal out now. And if you're on the $60 plan, you can actually just downgrade and save yourself some money down to the $40 per month plan. And now into the episode. Question from last week, or comment / concern / curiosity. They're currently a person that has the Tamron 70 to 180 and they're considering selling it for the 35 to 150 and basically wondering what is the most useful for weddings. And I think that the Tamron 35 to 150 is a superior beast to any of the 70 to 180s or 70 to 200s. Or if you do shoot Sony or you shoot Nikon, I would consider it to be one of my top recommendations. I'm not gonna pretend that I know exactly how you photograph a wedding day, but for most of us as wedding photographers, 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8 will get you through the entire day if you want it to. I've shot a few full wedding days on the channel with it, including getting ready, including the ceremony, and all the way into the reception to show that it can be useful in the reception. It's not my go-to recommendation, I don't think, for reception coverage. I prefer just an 85mm prime. And the place that I use the Tamron 35 to 150 is usually for the ceremony and surrounding the ceremony. And I also typically will use it on a camera that I can go into APS-C crop mode so that I'm getting some bonus zoom out of it. So what that means, you're just cropping in camera. So I zoom all the way to 150, hit the APS-C crop button that I've set up on my cameras, and it goes into 1.5 times mode, which means I'm now at 225mm and getting maybe some tighter close-ups. Or if I'm on video, it's even more awesome because it's still going to give me the same frame, the same quality, but now all of a sudden I'm in crop mode, so I don't really lose any megapixels on that. But you do lose megapixels if you are in photography mode. So I would say if the budget is there, that it is worth upgrading from any sort of 70 to 200 into the Tamron 35 to 150. If it's not a focal range you find yourself using often, if you're somebody that just is on a 50 all day and very, very happy about it, and that 70 to 200 or 70 to 180 is just a safety net, maybe I don't recommend going 35 to 150. It also comes down to form factor as well, that if you don't like using large lenses, it might not be a lens for you. It is big, it is heavy, and it's a bit of a pain to carry around all day, but at least for me, the usefulness outweighs the annoyance of the gear size for me. That may or may not be correct for you. So again, these are my suggestions, but interpret them with how you use gear on a wedding day. If you're watching the YouTube video, I got some things in front of me right now. We're gonna answer a few more questions in a minute. I'm gonna talk about some new things that I've acquired. First up, the Nikon 26mm f2.8. It is a pancake lens. If you're watching the video, you can see how small it is. And I like this lens a lot so far. This was one, I picked up the 24, the DX, and the 28, and they've been fine, but my friend at BJ Photo here in Waterloo, if you are local to Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Ontario, Canada, definitely go in there and shop. If you are somewhere further away, they'll do mail order as well if you order some things. And Abdullah was always pushing me to get this 26, and I was like, I don't think I need a 26 2.8. That sounds like a weird lens option, and I have been really, really enjoying this in my first testing. So yeah, shout out to this, more to come. I did a brief test with this at the studio. I think it came out at the same time as the 85 1.2. So it was definitely overshadowed in the wedding space because the 85 1.2 is just, it's an incredible lens, but again, very, very heavy. So it may or may not be for you, but it came out at the same time and I had kind of like 2 hours with both products and I very heavily prioritized the 85 1.2 and I didn't do a whole lot with this, but I wish I would have because I would have got one right then. Next up, fellow YouTuber, Willem Verbeek has released a point and shoot, just a little film camera. And it's a basic point and shoot. I think they're 60 bucks and it has a flash on it. And that's kind of all you need, 35 millimeter. I'm excited to run some rolls of film through here. I've been looking for just a basic camera that fits in a jacket pocket for a while now. I've gone through a lot of them. You can also spend a heck of a lot of money on a camera like that, especially with a nicer lens. The point and shoots, the luxury point and shoot market has been exploding really since maybe 2018. Contax T2, I believe, kind of led the wave, and everything else has just gotten more expensive. So if you're looking for something at a lower price point that's kind of almost a disposable camera vibe that you can reload, that you're not just throwing out a bunch of plastic after every use, check out the Long Weekend. I don't even know what it's called. It's just their camera. They only got one. It comes in kind of a cream color, or it comes in black. I think that's it. And I believe all their distribution is through the Moment website. So head on over there if you're interested in that. Samyang sent me their full kit. So in front of me on the YouTube video, you can see that there are 5 Samyang lenses that are all relatively small. So I'm using a wide angle lens, so maybe they look a little bit larger than they actually are, but they are quite small. So this is the Samyang V Cinema Kit. So they're all autofocus lenses, and they're specifically at least marketed towards video. And the cool thing is, if you are a video shooter, they are all the same thread size on the front, as well as I think, same physical weight and balance. So if you're moving between gimbals, the balance should remain identical. And they have a 20 millimeter, I believe. I think that's on the website. I did not get that one. I got the 24, the 35, the 45, the 75, and the 100. And the 100 is the only one that's like a little bit larger. It's still very, very compact and lightweight, but it's just a slightly bigger size than the other one. So it's not identical, but the 75 is. So my kit, if I was picking maybe 3 of these lenses, I would probably go 24, 35, and 75. They're all the same. It's really hard to I gotta put the big stickers on the front. And I feel like that would be a very, very nice video kit. Quality of these lenses for the cost, very, very high. There's also, you can turn this off if you want. There's a tally light on the front, so a little red light. So if you're self-recording, or if you want the person, the talent in front of your camera to know when you're actually recording and to see that red light, you can get that, and you don't have to have a camera with the tally light on the front. I like this a lot for self-filming. It makes my life a little bit easier knowing that, yes, in fact, I am still recording, and relieves that anxiety. But again, if you want, you can turn that off. It doesn't have to be a thing. So more to come on that. We're going to be filming, I guess, relevant on multiple different stages. So I am doing, one of my friends has opened a restaurant here in town a little while ago. They're interested in doing weddings. So I'm going to go and do a promotional video for them. Tim's going to do a little behind the scenes, and we're actually doing a styled shoot a week and a bit from now as well, at the same location. So I'm going to have multiple different behind the scenes looks at how we make a promotional video, as well as make content for ourselves. And by content, I mean wedding facing content. So we're doing a wedding styled shoot for a portfolio to show off the space, as well as show off kind of the images that can be created within the space. And I've scripted a little thing, so we're gonna make a reel and maybe a 1-minute highlight film, and we're gonna do some food photography and some food coverage, as well as some of the space, and as well as some with a couple. And then a few photos our friend Alex shot. I think they've hosted maybe 1 or 1.5 weddings there, and my friend Alex shot that, so we're going to have a little bit of that content in there as well. And that's how we make a package and make somebody happy, and that means that you're probably a preferred vendor there for quite some time when you create the first marketing that's ever existed for this place. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that on the Samyang V-AF Primes. So stay tuned for that. That will be out, I guess, next week. It's a pretty quick turnaround. It'll be out before the end of January. Next question I have, flashes for the RF system. Really like the direct flash you've been doing recently. Could you suggest one for the Canon RF system? I am doing, so a full flash course will be coming out next week on January 22nd, I believe. So that will show my behind the scenes flash strategy for everything, every type of flash I use. I think when it comes to flash photography for weddings, it's never gonna be the same. So I can't tell you that every time you are in a reception space, this is exactly how you use flash, because the variables are all going to be different. That maybe some days you have a perfect white ceiling that's easy to bounce light off. Other days, maybe you're in a barn, or maybe it's a black ceiling, or you're doing a destination wedding and you're out on a beach and there is no ceiling at all, and all you have is some ambient string lights. Flash is going to be very different depending on the situation. So I walk you through everything that I do on a wedding day, and how to problem solve and how to basically make the best light possible. For Canon, so Lindsay actually, the Godox V1 is what we've been using, and I think the V863s as well from Godox. And she was talking to the Canon and the Godox reps. So she went to both booths at Portrait Masters, I believe, in Arizona a little while ago. And they both couldn't really figure out how to properly use the flash in very low light conditions. So you'll notice that some flashes, when you put them on your camera, you'll get an ISO boost, or at least an effective ISO boost, so you can actually see what you're doing in your camera, and the IAF and everything will work properly, and you can have some visibility. And then you hit the flash, and then maybe it changes those settings, and the image review looks a little bit different than the preview that it was showing you on the back prior to hitting the shutter button. And with Nikon, this is pretty easy. There's also a setting, so if you ever put a controller on that, it just doesn't, your LCD is still very, very dark, but your flash is going off and maybe it's a little bit too dark to see what you're doing and what your frame is. You can change settings in your Nikon camera to make that easier for you. For Canon, we haven't really figured that out, which is a bit of a bummer. So it's nice to have some ambient light. Maybe it's important to have a little video light. I use the Stella Pro Reflex light a lot, which is quite expensive, but we also use it for pro video production. Or you could also use a light panel or just something to introduce a little bit of light into the scene in order to at least give yourself some perspective on what you're doing. This is, I guess Lindsay's using the Canon R6 and the R6 Mark II. I use the R3 a lot in lower light environments, and I don't know if it's different, but I feel like it was a much different and much easier experience. And I haven't used the R6 in a minute, but I know she was definitely dealing with some hard times when it came to very, very dimly lit low light situations, specifically during dancing pretty much. All those things said, I would probably still be recommending the Godox V1. I know Canon's also created their own flash system as well. If someone has used their flash system, comment in the YouTube video and let me know if it works or not. I am weirdly hesitant to use on-brand systems because they just seem to, the mirrorless tech is good and keeps evolving, but I feel like flash tech for brands just gets left behind. And specifically, the issue, I guess, overall for me is that the recycle times are so slow because a lot of the on-brand flash units always used AA batteries, and the recycle time on them is a lot slower than a lithium-ion battery from a Godox or a Profoto unit. So yeah, my recommendation would probably be a Godox V1 or the V863 for Canon. It's very easy to get those off camera as well. The transmitter, everything just works really well and really easy. So that would probably be my recommendation, my go-to for Canon. But I am curious if anyone's used the on-brand Canon labeled flashes with their mirrorless stuff and how good that actually is. Next question, running 2 lenses with crop A7R Mark V. So basically the situation is that if you have a A7R Mark V or maybe the A7CR, the newer one, so it's only 1 card slot, so maybe don't use it as a main camera, but you have maybe as a second camera, it's fine. If you are using that, it is a very, very high megapixel. I think it's 60-ish megapixels, 61 maybe. So it's a lot when it's full frame, but also you get that APS-C crop that I talked about. So I set my button, that's basically the custom button up top, to go into APS-C crop mode. I think it's C2. And what that means is if you are taking pictures on a wedding day, you can bounce between focal lengths very quickly, or effective focal lengths, I guess, very quickly. And you can make that 1 prime lens, basically 2 prime lenses. So the comment is basically that whenever you go into APS-C crop mode, you're still at 26 megapixels, which is totally fine for wedding photography, wedding day delivery. And you can turn that 24 millimeter lens into a 36 millimeter lens, and then a 50 into a 75. So if you have 2 cameras, 2 camera bodies, 2 lenses, a 24 and a 50, you can have a lot of versatility out of those 2 bodies and those 2 prime lenses that are, again, relatively small and compact. So that is definitely a benefit of going with a camera like the A7R Mark V or the A7CR. And yeah, that's how I use them. I usually just use 1 camera body, and I'll have a 35 typically on there for getting ready, and I will bounce into that 50-ish focal range for a lot of photos, as well as during the ceremony, also doing video hybrid coverage. If I'm on that 35 to 150, I'm always bouncing into crop mode to get a little bit more out of the long end of that lens, specifically during ceremonies. Next up, micro four thirds. So micro four thirds, there's so many benefits to it. The huge one that I like the most maybe is just the form factor and the fact that everything is just incredibly small. The downside for me is that I shoot all of my lenses wide open all the time. I really love that shallow depth of field aesthetic. And you get it, but you just don't get it as much with the micro four thirds cameras. So that's definitely a trade-off. The quality is absolutely still there. The cost is much more attractive than a full frame kit, but I just like the look of the full frame wide open lenses all the time. If I was always shooting at f4, maybe this wouldn't be a huge thing for me, but as somebody that shoots that 35 1.4 at 1.4 all day, and a lot of 50 at 1.2 and 85 at 1.4 as well, I'm happiest, I guess, on full frame, and that's a choice that I made for me. It doesn't have to be right or wrong for you, but that's what I do. I'm okay to incur a little bit more both cost and also physical size in order to do that. I'm also gonna put a brief caveat out here. Panasonic has a lot of money, and you might have noticed that all of your favorite YouTube friends are, if not, I'm switching systems to Lumix. A lot of them are using Lumix and using the S5 II specifically in videos. Those are all sponsored videos. So even if it looks like it's packaged like just testing out the S5 II, there is a very, very good chance that Panasonic has paid them money in order for them to just go test out that camera. So be aware that that's a thing that goes on. It happens a lot with Panasonic. It happens not so much with Sony. Sony will typically loan you some gear. It's very rare that they'll give you a paycheck to just like go and make a generic video. If you're making a video, it's a very clearly sponsored video for Sony. And the other brands, I don't really think pay people a whole lot of money to use their stuff. So just something to be aware of when you see your favorite YouTuber upload a, hey, switching systems, goodbye Sony, hello Lumix. Pretty good chance that they've been paid to be an exclusive ambassador for some time. And it's kind of a sketchy terrain. Actually, the law, so Tony Northrup and I talked about this, the law, the FTC guideline is very specific that if you are an ambassador for a brand, every single piece of content you put out technically has to be, hey, this video is sponsored by, or you have to click, there's a box on YouTube when you upload a video that says that they've been paid or there's some sort of transaction happening. And a lot of people don't do this, so just something to be aware of if you do see that switch, and know that there are probably some reasons behind the scenes why that switch is happening, and it's not straight because they just love a specific system. And Panasonic is the only brand, at least in my mind, that does this. I don't know of anyone that's been paid to switch Sony or switch to Canon, switch to Nikon, or switch to Fuji. So yeah, I'm sure it's happened. But yeah, maybe read the line behind what people are saying whenever they are trying to sell you a product on the internet. Next up, Sony or Canon. I am using both Sony and Canon A7R Mark V, R5 and R6 Mark II. See the primes on the A7R Mark V are a little shaky as they don't have stabilization. Zooms on the R5 like the 24-70 and 15-35 have stabilization, and I feel like it's more stabilized. So punching in here on a fancier mic, I talk about video first and then photography, but photography, if you're shooting, your shutter speed is your focal length. Usually you're fine on any system with IBIS now. If you are shooting any of the newer Sony cameras, you will have, if you don't have, I think, dynamic stabilization as like the super enhanced one, you should have active stabilization, which is what I use all of the time, and I love it. So I don't use stabilized primes, I use that 35 1.4 a lot, and with active stabilization, handheld, I am completely happy and fine. If you're using dynamic, you could even replicate some gimbal shots. There's tons of examples of this when I lose track because Sony released so many cameras, but the camera, is it the E1? I forgot. Where they introduced this dynamic stabilization, there were a lot of tests of people just being like, is this gimbal or is this handheld? And you can't really tell, especially if you're being careful and you're not doing a run and chase the couple like down the aisle at full speed. If you're just using it as you would use a gimbal low key, you can absolutely get by, I think, using dynamic stabilization. With active stabilization, any of your handheld footage is gonna look great, and it's what I use all the time. This all said, so I don't know why we do this. I don't know why I started doing this, but I do handheld IBIS tests for pretty much every camera that I test. And we always do this, for whatever reason, we'll always do most of our camera tests weirdly either in Iceland or in Japan. And I will do a handheld test, usually with traffic in the foreground or with a waterfall. And for whatever reason, Canon always massively excels in this, especially when you stack a 35 with 1.8 with the IS, with a Canon camera with embodied stabilization as well. I think I did a 7-second handheld exposure. So I had kind of my 3 points of contact, or I guess what I could. So I had it smacked against my face and my two hands and kind of at least stabilize as much as I could with my body. But I was able to do, I think, a 7-second handheld exposure, and it was pretty good. It was obviously, you want to use a tripod if you're ever doing something like that, but it worked out pretty well. I think everything else I can do maybe a 2-second with Nikon, maybe I'm gonna say 1 second with Sony. Their IBIS overall just isn't as good, but they make up for it in the software. So if you are using active and you're doing video, it's going to be good. But that active doesn't function if you're doing photography only. It's just a video mode feature. So yeah, 1 second-ish with Sony, which is fine. Again, you're gonna be tripoding if you're ever doing long exposures, but Canon just massively excels in that weird handheld IBIS ability. Next, not question, get Gabe McClintock on the podcast. I'm hoping so. Gabe's a bit of a mystery. I'm so surprised. So there's a video with him on the channel which talks about his posing strategy, and some of it's a little bit controversial, that he doesn't allow his couples to kiss. He doesn't really let them talk throughout the experience either, and he lets that build the tension so that you can see the tension in his work and the romance and just the closeness. And a lot of that comes from the behind the scenes, that he is not allowing his couples to do the easy things, which is when you're really close to your partner, usually you kiss, and he doesn't allow that, or at least he tells them to not. I'm sure it accidentally happens at some point. I would love to have him on the podcast, and maybe if there's not a video camera in his face, he would be more inclined to do it. I'll legitimately send him a message after I record this, and I'll ask him about it. Next, we have somebody switching from Canon back to Nikon, and so Nikon has, my favorite DSLR lenses are the G primes. So there's an 85, I like the 35, the 24 I didn't use a whole lot, but the 58 is this like sleeper lens. Technically, clinically, it's not good. There's a lot of issues. I'm gonna say it takes 5 weddings for you to learn all of the little quirks of it and when not to use it, or what conditions are going to cause it to be really not good, including backlit or really, really high contrast scenes. But whenever you use it in the right situation with the right light, it is just an incredible lens. And I wish, or I guess I could theoretically, I can run them through the FTZ. I wish that they took basically what they did for that lens, and maybe they will, I don't know, and bring it into a Nikon Z mount, because I'm just a little bit more comfortable using native glass when possible, but I currently have that lens on loan from my friend Liam, and I've been using it through the adapter, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, shout out to those G lenses, because they are very, very nice. One last question, we're gonna wrap up today. So I talk a lot about using, for Sony specifically, using the A7R Mark V for my photography only wedding days, and not using it a whole lot for hybrid because of the buffer speed. And I tested it at least with V90 cards. So my struggle with buying a camera, and then at least prior to, I guess Sony actually has reasonable CF Express type A cards, B, whatever the expensive CF Express is. Those go into the Sony A7R Mark V, but they're so expensive, and to use 2 of those cards, especially how I use them, I would probably need at least 256 gig. I would be happier with a 512 in each slot, or whatever the closest is to that they do in CF Express. And that becomes very expensive when you do those 2 cards. But then also, if I'm shooting a triple wedding weekend, I don't wipe those cards the next day. So I would need at least, I would say, 6 of those cards. And I don't even really feel comfortable wiping those the next week. So maybe I would actually need 10 to 12 to 14 of those cards. And that's very, very expensive. I did some tests with the V90 SD cards, which are the faster SD cards. And in my testing, at least, if somebody can do a better job of this, awesome. My results using faster cards was still that the buffer speed was not as good as the 874 when writing to the card. I don't think that the card speed is the fault. I think that that's not the choke point. I think that it's actually the buffer from the camera kicking the data out to the card. And at least with the SD V90s, it wasn't as fast as my Sony A7 IV. Smaller megapixel count on the Sony A7 IV, so just a little bit faster to get it through the pipeline and get onto your card. So you're able to record video a little bit faster, because unfortunately, a little bit faster is a big difference on a wedding day when a couple is walking down the aisle towards you and you're doing photos and you're doing videos. If you are dealing with a camera that's a little bit slower, so if I was shooting on the A7R Mark V, what I would be doing is I'd actually be doing the video clip first and then switching to photography mode, which inverts my brain, my process that I'm always there to be a photographer first and to do hybrid video second. But I did this with, I forget, it was one of my Nikon cameras, maybe the D750. The buffer speed just wasn't there. And I was forced to basically do the video first and then switch to photography, because video is easier. It's smaller file sizes to get onto the card, and it's writing kind of in real time. Whereas when you're taking pictures, it's once you take the picture is when that begins. And if you take a lot of pictures, all of a sudden you clog your buffer up and you can't switch to video mode. One workaround could be to use 2 different cameras and to have one camera for video in one hand and one for photography. But I found that just using one camera makes my life a lot easier because I know exactly what those settings are going to be. I've been using that camera in my hands. I'm not going to pick up a camera and realize I have to switch the white balance in a non-opportune time. So I like to do everything on one camera when possible. And yeah, I think that the Sony a7 IV is a better choice for that overall. And also you save a little bit of money too. That's all for today. If you're interested, drop some questions on the YouTube video. I am happy to get back to you in next week's podcast. And as I mentioned a few times, the Flash course is coming out on the 22nd of this month of January 2024. And it's every way that I use a flash on a wedding day. We do some examples, we talk about some gear, and I give my suggestions and recommendations for you as somebody that probably knows a little bit about flash, but you're interested in learning a little bit more. Or even if you're coming at this from an absolute zero and you're just a pure natural light photographer and flash intimidates you a little bit. My process was that I came into photography through concerts. So I did concerts and I did snowboard and skateboard, which is also a very heavy off-camera flash use genre of photography. I came into weddings from there. So I was fortunate in the fact that I already basically figured out how to light scenes with off-camera flash prior to ever coming to a wedding day. So it was a little less intimidating, but it still took a lot of time to transition those skills from skateboard, snowboard, from concert, from dingy nightclubs into something that's a little bit better lit and a little bit prettier. My goal with flash is to always hide it and to not let people know that it's a flash lit shot, unless I'm trying to make it very obvious. If it's like a direct flash, like paparazzi-esque feel, then maybe it's okay. But overall, I'm trying my best to hide flash and to make it seem like it's just the natural way that the scene was lit, and trying to emulate that there's just a window there, rather than making it completely obvious. But that's what I do. It doesn't have to be what is right or wrong for you, but I give you all the skills and all the tools that I have learned and that I use consistently on wedding days to problem solve. So if that sounds interesting to you, hop on over to the members website, taylorjacksoncourses.com, and there's a link at the very top that you can go and get access to everything. And until the end of January, it is $40 to get in. So it's a monthly membership, $40 to get in. And at the end of January, it goes back up to the regular rate, which is $60. So get in before then if you're interested. That's all for today. Questions, drop them down below. See you again next time.